Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
From Michigan Public, this is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
Michigan ranks among the worst states in government transparency, and taxpayers deserve to have real measures that will push open wide the door on government secrecy.
It has been a decade since Michigan ranked last in a national study of state ethics and transparency laws.
Last, in 2015, the state received an F grade from the Center for Public Integrity and Global Integrity.
But that doesn't mean that lawmakers, well, certain lawmakers at least, haven't, for those past 10 years, tried to make things better. And this past week in Lansing has brought transparency back into the headlines. From the Senate passing bills to open lawmakers in the governor's office to Freedom of Information Act requests.
I don't know what more we could say to make the case for this, because the bad behavior and the darkness over this Capitol building makes the case better than we can.
To the introduction of bills that would stop lawmakers from signing NDAs.
That is non-disclosure agreements, something we have seen increase over the years with large economic development projects, partially funded with taxpayer incentives.
It is fundamental to our democracy that lawmakers are free to communicate with their constituents. NDAs and the signing of them prevent that from happening.
Plus, new rules in the House that would require earmarks be publicly disclosed in the budget process. It's all making a very interesting moment in Lansing. So what's behind it? And more importantly, will the state capitol become more transparent? There is no one else we would rather pose these questions to than Craig Mauger, Mr. Lansing Transparency himself. He is political reporter at the Detroit News. Hello, Craig.
Hey, that's going to have to go on my resume, top line.
I know. So, Craig, first, can we just set the table here? I think sometimes folks talk about transparency in Lansing and are like, yeah, sure, seems like an important thing, but it's not always top of mind. Can you just explain why transparency actually matters and the real world implications that the lack of transparency has mattered in Michigan?
Yeah, I mean, transparency matters because it shines light on how our government works for us. I mean, these people, everyone in the legislature, in the governor's office, they're being paid to work on behalf of constituents, us, the voters, the taxpayers. And if we don't have access to how they're making decisions, what decisions they're making, and what's driving those decisions, it hinders our ability to make our own decisions at the ballot box. And that's what this is all about, getting information about how government is working to the people who are responsible for the government, us.
Let's dig into some of the things that have happened in the past week that seem to be leading towards possibly more transparency. So we would know so much more if lawmakers and the governor's office were not exempt from FOIA. These are Freedom of Information Act requests. So two state senators, a Democrat, Jeremy Moss, and a Republican, Ed McBroom, they are just FOIA evangelists. For a decade now, they have been working to remove these exemptions. And it used to be that for years, the House would move on FOIA exemptions. The state Senate would not budge. Then in this last term, when Democrats controlled all of Lansing, it was the Senate that passed the bills. The House did not. Now, early in this term, the Democratic-controlled Senate again passed these FOIA bills, introduced yet again by McBroom and Moss. The House, though, might not. Can you explain what is going on here? Is this a partisan issue, a chamber issue? Why have the parts not come together to pass these bills?
I think it's been for a variety of reasons over the years. But I mean, previously, we had two Senate Majority Leaders, Arlen Meekhoff and Mike Shirkey, who were fundamentally opposed to just about every transparency measure that's aimed at the government, aimed at giving people more information. They would oppose them. And that led for multiple years to the situation you're talking about of the House would pass FOIA expansion, then it would die in the Senate. With Shirkey gone and now Democrats in control in the Senate, they've prioritized this. Last session, the Democratic House Speaker Joe Tate did not prioritize it. He essentially let it die. It's going to be part of his legacy. He had the chance to get this done and he didn't take advantage of it. So now it gets kicked to Matt Hall. And Matt Hall has essentially said, hey, these FOIA proposals the Senate passed are, he said the phrase dead on arrival in the House. It doesn't make a lot of sense because in the past, even as recently as last year, Matt Hall was calling for FOIA expansion. So here we are in this circumstance where you had someone calling for this last year and now opposing it this year. It doesn't make a heap of sense.
Okay, but I'm going to make you be Craig Mauger here and try to help us make sense of it.
Yeah.
What are the reasons that you can think of for this opposition now?
I think it's a power struggle. You have two sides, the Democrats who control the Senate and the governor's office and the Republicans who control the House, who are now locked in this battle for who's going to set the agenda in Lansing. The Senate very quickly, these are the first bills they passed of the term, said FOIA expansion is what we want to do, kick it over to the House. And now as they battle for positioning, Paul says, I'm not going to take up these bills. And these bills that are broadly supported, they've passed the House. Similar bills have passed the House with almost unanimous support in the past, are now stalled because of this. And it will be interesting to see if there's some negotiation between the House and Senate that can get them moving, or if this is just dead now. I mean, that's the question before everyone. I mean, we've gotten to this point. You asked earlier kind of what got us here. What's gotten us to this point where this is now at the forefront is had a number of scandals. Some have led to criminal charges and some haven't, about how items in the budget are created, how leaders of state government have operated when it comes to lobbyists and money. Keep in mind that the last two Aprils, April 2024, April 2023, we've had a former House Speaker criminally charged. Who knows what will occur in April 2025? All bets are off. But, you've had all these criminal charges. You've had these investigations. And you've also had this anti-government sentiment. Yeah. I mean, this anti-institution sentiment that Donald Trump and Elon Musk might be representations of. And you've got these two things commingling, and that's giving this jet fuel to, hey, Lansing needs to do something about transparency. And all the ratings and all the studies that are done says that that's also true.
Craig, let's turn to these non-disclosure agreements. Last week, I covered the introduction of new bills that would limit lawmakers' abilities to sign NDAs. And Craig, you reported a couple years ago that nearly 1 in 5 lawmakers have signed these agreements. Almost always they're regarding economic development projects that have some kind of state incentives attached to them. Can you just explain what's going on here?
I mean, this is a relatively new phenomenon, at least in the reach of these agreements. The Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which is in charge of luring all these businesses to the state, have been quietly behind the scenes working with lawmakers when they have a project that they want to get incentives for. You're talking about hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, maybe billions of dollars in incentives for some of these projects. They go to lawmakers and pitch them on the project. And part of these pitches has been, hey, we're going to give you some information on the project for your consideration. You need to sign this non-disclosure agreement that says you're not going to give any of the information that we give you out to anybody, including your constituents. I mean, that's directly what these agreements say. You can share this information with no third party. That's the voters, the people that sent these individuals to Lansing. These disclosures have been widespread. My colleague Beth LeBlanc here has done a lot of reporting on this, documented a lot of this, that a huge amount of the legislators over there in the state House and Senate have signed these things. And it's a situation where elected representatives are taking information with a pledge from another quasi-governmental agency, the MEDC, saying, I won't share this information with my constituents. It's a wild circumstance. You have some lawmakers who've proposed banning them. You've had the new House Speaker, Matt Hall, speaking out against these things, and it's unclear if there's room for reform here.
We should point out that the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, defends the use of these NDAs, saying that this basically opens the door, that there are deals that just wouldn't come to the state if the details would be shared publicly, including with these companies' competitors. Is there any way to thread that needle?
That's something we have begun studying here. I mean, the MEDC says that this is what companies are requiring. And I think a question that we have started to try to venture to answer is are they doing this in other states? If this is what companies require, are other states doing this? And it's going to take some time to answer that, but we are looking to answer it. And, the only counter to what the MEDC is saying is this is not just the company getting the foot in the door. This is not just the MEDC talking to the company initially. This is when it reaches a state when the company says, yeah, we're interested in Michigan. Now, how much taxpayer money, taxpayer aid and incentives can you give us? And it seems like when you start asking for taxpayer assistance, money that would otherwise go to other government programs that maybe everyone benefits from, that's when you have to start giving the public a little bit of information about what you're doing. I mean, that's the line the MEDC has to walk here, that lawmakers have to walk here, that it's not just an internal deliberation once you start talking about money that comes out of everyone's pockets in the state.
Craig, you noted that this has in some respects become politicized. Talk of NDAs and a lot of political ads in this last election year about which lawmakers had signed them. It's interesting to note the two folks who introduced these bills, a so-called Democratic Socialist and a really far-right MAGA Republican, together.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wild thing where you have one of the furthest right lawmakers in the House, one of the furthest left coming together for this horseshoe moment and saying, hey, this is something that needs to be done to improve government. But it does also speak to the fact that a lot of the people in the middle of the political kind of divide, the moderate people, have been the ones signing these NDAs. So you wonder how much room there is on either side to get a majority to vote on something like this. With all of these transparency measures, something to think about is that when they get put up for votes, when they're actually up on the board and lawmakers have to make a decision with accountability, are you for this or are you against it? Almost always people vote in support of them. It's the battle that advocates have to go through to get them up on the board that has been the hurdle for all of this.
Well, it's just part of being a leader is to, let other people go out and say that they're for it and then make sure that it doesn't go up on the board.
There's definitely something to that.
Shocked that would happen in Lansing.
So there is this sort of, I guess, possibility of a standoff here because Governor Whitmer has made economic development and the projects that have ostensibly needed these NDAs a part of her vision for growth of the state. Looking ahead, is there support to get this passed? And how do you think Gretchen Whitmer would respond if it's sent to her?
I would hate to guess what the governor would do with any of this, but it seems like there would be support in the legislature. The question is, can there be some type of negotiation made that gets FOIA through the House and something like this NDA ban through the Senate? And if there is no negotiation, you could see on the leaders of the opposite chamber just sitting on these. I mean, I'm sure the governor doesn't want to have to veto an NDA ban, given that these NDAs have not been very popular. But she could have Winnie Brinks in the Senate just sit on this if the House votes on it. And the same thing with FOIA. I mean, Matt Hall could just prevent his members from having to vote on this by not ever putting it up for a vote. That's where we are. But at some point, as you've been covering this for a long time, at some point, these two sides, Matt Hall and Winnie Brinks, are going to have to come together and get some things done. It's just how it works. They have to pass a budget eventually. At some point, someone's priority is going to have to be, one through a negotiation with the other. And maybe these things play a role in that. In the past, FOIA has not been something that's been negotiated for. Will it be a big enough priority of the Senate this time that it actually gets done? Who knows?
Yeah. We're speaking with Craig Mauger, a politics reporter at the Detroit News, about transparency or lack thereof at the state capitol. We have talked about the state Senate passing FOIA reform, bills introduced to end the signing of non-disclosure agreements by state lawmakers. So let's now, in the final minutes that we have, talk about the state budget that you just brought up. This rule that the House adopted, both Democrats and Republicans voted for it. It would require that all earmarks, these are otherwise sometimes known as pet projects or pork in the state budget that they would have to be publicly disclosed before they could be voted on in the budget. This disclosure would include details of the name of the lawmaker who's requesting the dollars and who would get the dollars, plus rules about the types of organization that would get the money. First, Craig, some folks just might be shocked to learn that right now these are largely hidden from public view, these requests.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they're hidden, and a lot of times the projects that can get millions upon millions of dollars through the state budget aren't debuted for the public until, a few hours before the final vote. And sometimes we've documented situations in the past where lawmakers in their own district, a project in their district will get funding, and they will not even know when they vote on the budget that it's in there, and they won't know why the project ends up there. There was a situation with a real estate development in Ann Arbor that this happened with about 4 years ago. The Ann Arbor lawmaker said, we had no idea that this project got, I think, tens of millions of dollars through the budget, and it was very difficult to figure out who won this appropriation. So this is the kind of thing that Matt Hall and the House Republicans are trying to prevent. They're trying to get a little early notice of what the projects are in the budget and who is responsible for them.
The House has adopted these rules. They say this is what they're going to do. But of course, the budget is put together by both chambers, the House and the Senate. The Senate hasn't agreed to these rules. What does that mean?
That's going to be the question to watch. I mean, I've wondered about that myself. Not only does the House and Senate do the budget, but the governor is a force in the budget as well. And we have seen in the past, for listeners to understand how this complicated process works, usually if there's money available for projects, they divvy up the money among the House Dems, the House Republicans, Senate Dems, Senate Republicans, and the governor's office. Everyone gets some projects. So if only the House is saying we are committed to disclosing the earmarks in the budget, what happens with the earmarks that are being won by senators? What's happening with the earmarks that Governor Whitmer is getting in the budget? Because we know there will be some of those. And that's why this earmark proposal kind of needs buy-in from everyone for it to really work as it's envisioned. And we'll see if they can get that.
And interestingly enough, in that press conference we alluded to that happened last week, Matt Hall made it clear that the budget may just take longer this year than it has in the past because of some of these reasons, and that he's fine with it.
Yeah, and everyone, all of the eyes among the Lansing lobby corps, as you all know, and the observers of this city are wondering, can they actually get a budget done? And when can they get it done by? And all signs, including a lawsuit filed recently by the Senate Majority Leader against the House Speaker, are kind of ominous right now.
That is Craig Mauger leaving us with that ominous note. He is politics reporter at the Detroit News, the one we turn to better understand all things transparency or lack thereof at the state capitol. Craig Mauger, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you have been listening to Michigan Public today, you have no doubt heard more about the state budget. That is because Governor Gretchen Whitmer's administration introduced her executive budget recommendation today to a joint session of the State House and Senate Appropriations Committee. You can hear continued coverage about the $83.5 billion budget proposal here on Michigan Public, or check the website, michiganpublic.org. And while you're at that website, be sure, if you haven't already, to sign up for the It's Just Politics newsletter. Every week, Rick and I will be in your inbox Friday afternoons, bringing you the latest on what you need to know that's happening in Lansing. And that is It's Just Politics for today. I am Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
Let's talk again next week.